The time is 8:10. The Home Secretary, John Reid, experienced at first hand a taste of Muslim anger this week. He was talking to a group of Muslims, urging them to do more to tackle extremism, when he was shouted down by one of his audience, Abu Izzadeen. He told Mr. Reid he was a tyrant who had no right to come to a Muslim area. Mr. Izzadeen was bustled out of the room, since when he's avoided the media. But he's with me now. Good morning to you.
Morning.
You said to Mr. Reid, "How dare you come to this area?" I suppose I should say to you, how dare you suggest that he shouldn't?
My address to Mr. Reid was primarily to deal with his behaviour in the past year and his previous position as Defence Minister. He's been killing Muslims abroad in Iraq and Afghanistan, and as Home Secretary he's been presiding over arrest of many Muslims. And that, in that light, how dare he come to address the Muslims?
He's been carrying out the law of the land.
Which is completely oppressive.
In your view?
Definitely.
Is he not allowed to express his own view?
His view is nothing more than to ask the Muslim community to turn in on itself and spy and do the police's job.
No,
that's not going to happen.
What he's saying to Muslim people in this country is that if they know of a crime that may be committed by a Muslim or by anybody else, then they should inform the authorities. Isn't that everybody's responsibility, including yours?
I think it's much more wider than that. What we're facing in the UK is a complete attack, a crusade by the British government. Over 1,000 arrests, many houses have been raided in the daytime, at night time, women have been arrested, taken away from their homes, with no evidence whatsoever. And the Muslim community's had enough. And that's the reason why we're so angry. We're outrageous to see someone like John Reid, who's been presiding over so much attack against the Muslim community, come and address us as if he's our friend. He's an enemy towards Islam and Muslims. And I believe those thousands that's been arrested, and that's official figures, let alone those that have not been mentioned, documented, they'll be very supportive of what I said.
How come that Mr. Reid was given a pretty sympathetic reception then at this event?
Yeah, the British government, they always have a policy of divide and rule, where they have their own, we say in Urdu, chamches, British Raj mentalities, who will work for them and support their agenda. And unfortunately, some of those that were present, not all, some of those that were present are from the selected, chosen ones from the British government, who have a kind ear to the British government. But from the general masses, those who have been arrested, those who have been targeted by the police, I mean, it's not going to wash.
How can you presume to speak for the general masses of Muslims? You're not elected to any post.
We're not talking about elections. I'm a Muslim. I pray in the mosque. I work with the community. I live with the community. John Reid doesn't. And I'm telling you that we've had enough. We've had enough of the police raids. We've had enough of the shootings in Forest Gates. We've had enough of the arrests inside Walthamstow, inside restaurants, under the guise of your war against terror, which everybody knows, Muslim, non-Muslims, it's a war against Islam. And I'm telling you something. If they don't stop this, there's going to be a very strong reaction from the community. Maybe not from me as the individual level, but people have had enough.
What do you mean by that, a very strong reaction?
Well, I think the British government, they should really open their eyes and smell the coffee. You can only push people to a certain level until they explode. We're not talking about a self-suicide operation, but there's a tension within the community because they are being targeted. The British police said that as a Muslim, you're more likely to be stopped, you're more likely to be searched, you're more likely to be harassed because of your belief, you're more likely to be shot because you look like a Muslim. We're not going to take that.
Well,
and I don't think any community in the UK will take that.
Well, you've obviously heard the British government say something that I've never heard, because I've never heard them say that. What they have done is, it's certainly true that they have questioned and arrested a large number of Muslims. The reason for that is blatantly obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's a war against Islam and Muslims, that's why.
No, the reason for that is because the vast majority of terrorist attacks, major terrorist attacks, before and including, obviously, after and including 9/11, have been carried out by Muslims on behalf of Islam.
If we're going to talk about terrorism, I think you can look to Tony Blair, because at the moment, the biggest terrorist on the planet is George Bush and his sidekick.
Well, let's talk about 9/11 and the terrorist attacks that have happened since then, including one in this country, which killed a large number of British people, including some Muslims.
Yeah, that's true. Talk about that. How many people died in 9/11? 3,000? Let's give a nice round figure of 5,000 people. Since 9/11, the British Crusader forces, the American Crusader force, and George Bush said it's a crusade. So I'm not going to argue with the President of the United States. He said it's a crusade. Tony Blair sided with him, he's a crusader. They have killed, in the bombing campaign alone, some said 70,000 inside Iraq. Some
Was
said
9/11
100,000.
justified then?
1 second. Some said 100,000. So if we're going to talk about casualties, look to the bigger picture. You can see the Muslim community worldwide are suffering from many 9/11s, many 7/7s throughout the Muslim world.
So are you telling me that 9/11 was justified?
By the British government and the American government. That's why the real terrorist is Tony Blair. He's a murderer. There's blood on his hands of Muslims in Afghanistan, Muslims inside Iraq, not to mention the American weapons that were coming via the UK to bomb Muslims inside
All right,
Lebanon.
if you don't like Tony Blair, I tell you what you do about him. You vote against him. That's your right as a British citizen. You try and chuck him out of office if you disapprove of what he's doing. But are you telling me that 9/11 and the subsequent attacks, including the attack on this country, were justified because of the things you're
Who's
just saying?
talking about justification?
I am asking you whether you know perfectly well what the word means.
I
I'm
never mentioned
asking you
anything
whether,
about justification.
Well, I'm asking
I
you
told
whether
about
that
the
is-
reality of Muslims being attacked after 9/11.
I'm asking you
and
a
I said
very
the
simple
numbers of
question.
casualties are much greater on the Muslim side. So no one talk about justification apart from yourself.
Were they? I'm asking you whether they were justified.
Well, why don't you ask the terrorists?
No, no,
Those who
I'm
took it
asking
out.
you because you're sitting
you
in
ask
front of me.
terrorists. Those who took out the operations, we should go to them and ask them, why did you do so? And I believe there was a video released by Mohammed Siddiqui Khan after the operations they did in 7/7, and he explained clearly why he did those. Now, it's not for me to justify or for me to condemn, because it doesn't make any difference.
Well,
People are still dead.
Let me tell you
Rather, we
what,
should go to those who did the operation and ask them, why did they do it? And they said, clearly, if you bomb us, we're going to bomb you back.
Let me tell
That's
you
not about
what
justification, that's about what they said.
let me tell you what you'll have seen it for yourself, of course, the NOP poll of British Muslims that Channel 4 News showed. Almost 1 in 4 British Muslims believe that the attacks on London last July were justified, and that's the word, because of British support for the American
So what are you asking me for? If you've got a nice, clear poll, what's the difference about my opinion?
I am asking, well, because you presume to barrack John Reid in the way that you did. You told him that you were not, that he was, he had no
An
right
enemy to Islam,
to be.
enemy to Muslims.
Yeah, you went, that's right, an enemy of Islam.
Of course he is.
An enemy of Islam.
When they said it's a crusade, what does a crusade mean?
But you see, you're
Have studied
suggesting
history?
to me that you represent...
I'm not suggesting anything. I don't claim to represent the Muslims.
You don't?
I represent Islamic viewpoint.
Well,
The
whose
tyrant
Islamic
comes,
viewpoint? Your
the Islamic viewpoint.
The Islam. There's only
The
one, is
Islamic
there?
viewpoint, yes, in regards to this.
Is there really?
Mr. Reid, he's
Is there
a tyrant.
really only one? Tara Graham,
The one
for
who doesn't
instance,
implement
does not
Sharia,
represent,
he is a tyrant. When Tony Blair says this evil ideology, he's talking about Islam. There are tyrants, enemies to Islam, enemies to Muslim. There can be no debate and discussion when they kill Muslims, when they murder Muslims. They need to stop that immediately. Then we can open debates.
And are you honestly telling me that your view on this is the only view in Islam? Because I have talked to a large number of very serious Islamic figures, Muslims, who tell me that that is not the case, that they do not agree with you and indeed the views that you've expressed here this morning.
That Tony Blair's a tyrant. I couldn't care less, quite honestly. You may bring someone who says to you that, in fact, the British government are the best in the world. They're so kind to Muslims. They love Islam.
That isn't the point.
Tony Blair loves Islam. George Bush loves Islam. In fact, his name is Maulana Blair and Maulana Bush. Sheikh Bush, Sheikh Blair. I couldn't care less. The reality is, Tony Blair is a crusader, enemy towards Muslims, enemy to Allah. And those who believe otherwise, I think they should really wake up and smell the coffee. The reality is so clear, even the blind man can see. When they kill Muslims, they go under the guise of the crusade. When the British forces go into Afghanistan, Iraq, they go as crusader forces. They're blessed by their own priests before they kill Muslims.
Well, I'm not even going to enter into that discussion with you.
Then
but,
don't.
Well, no,
I can't force you. Free country.
Quite so. It is a free country. So why did you tell John Reid, as you did when you interrupted him, that you're not interested in the freedom of speech?
That's right. I'm a Muslim. I mean, the reason why I speak out...
You're a Muslim, so you're not
the reason
interested
why I
in freedom
speak
of
out
speech.
is because Islam obliges me to forbid the evil. The Messenger Muhammad ﷺ, he said, "Man ra'a minkum munkaran fayughayyiru biyadihi." Whoever sees the evil, let him change it with his hand. فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ بِلِسَانِهِ. If he can't, with his tongue. The Muslim, he will always forbid the evil. And one of the evils is those who kill Muslims in Afghanistan, like John Reid, to come to the Muslims and address us. Is a shame on us to accept this, because the man's a murderer. If it was my wife being killed in Afghanistan, I would never accept it. Because I'm a Muslim, I won't accept it. Our Prophet said the Muslim community is one unique body beside all others.
Can I just
Therefore,
remind
he
you that
killed
you're
my mother, my sister, and my family. That's why I was very angry. And anyone who believes in Islam, he would be furious that such a tyrant could come and address the community.
You're not happy with this country. A lot of people would say...
Who said I'm not happy with this country?
Well, you're telling me that
I
it's
love
led
the
by...
UK.
You're telling me it's
Allah,
led by...
He created the whole universe.
You're telling me it's led by a
planet.
tyrant. You don't approve of the rules,
That's
the way
right.
in which this country functions.
That's
you don't
correct.
approve of the government.
But who said I don't like the
Well,
UK?
then, why can you not go somewhere where Islam is the
Oh, I
is the
see. Is
law?
there going to be a mass deportation for those who don't agree with the system?
Did I suggest that?
I'm asking you a question.
No, I was the
Should
one
it be
who
one?
asked you. No,
if
what
we
I'm...
disagree with the government,
There
and we
is-
have a system which is better, which is either Sharia, we should leave.
There is a convention on programs like this during which the presenter asks the question and the guest answers the question. What I'm asking you is whether, if this country is so offensive to you and to some of your friends, you don't have to stay here. You can go somewhere where there is Islamic law. You can go to Saudi
I think you've
Arabia.
misunderstood the reality. As a Muslim,
I've misunderstood it.
I believe Allah is Al-Khaliq. He's the one who created the whole universe. He created the UK. Doesn't belong to you, doesn't belong to the Queen, doesn't belong to the Anglo-Saxons.
I suggest it doesn't belong to
Belongs
you
to
either.
Allah, the Creator. And He has put us on the planet Earth to live wherever we want and implement the Sharia rules. If I live in the UK, I
That
would
is your
call
view.
for Islam.
Forgive me, that is your rule, your view.
It's not for me to forgive you.
That
If
we
you die as a
should...
non-Muslim, you need to ask Allah to forgive you.
You want Sharia law in this country? Then,
of course we want Sharia rules.
Right, then I'll tell
And
you
in
what
fact,
you do.
all
Now,
Muslims
may
want
I just
Sharia.
finish your point just for a second? Let me get a word in. You want
Please.
Sharia law in this country.
That's
I'll
right.
tell you what you do. You stand as a member of Parliament. You encourage your friends and your colleagues to stand as members of Parliament, and you try to change the law in this country democratically. That's the way we do things in this country, unlike, for instance, Saudi Arabia, where they do have the sort of law of which you approve. Now, if you want to change the way this country functions, why can you not do it in a democratic way? What's wrong with that? And if not, what are you doing here?
Democracy means sovereignty for man. And as a Muslim, we believe sovereignty for the Sharia. Therefore, I would never
Right.
take
So
part
go somewhere where
in the
Sharia
democratic
prevails.
principles.
Why not do that?
Rather, I will work to change society in accordance to the Islamic methodology.
But you will
Which
not
is
do it.
undemocratic.
But you will not do it under the British way of doing things. You will not
What is the British
observe
way
the
of doing things?
democratic
Fish and chips?
process. You will not observe the democratic process.
We observe the Islamic rules wherever we are.
The Islamic process, but not the democratic process.
That's right, yes.
Thanks very much indeed.
Thank
Abu
you very
Izzadeen.
much.